Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPaWrites here again, and today I've got another Remnant 2 video for you guys as content is slowing down in the game the further we get away from the Forgotten Kingdom DLC, so I figured it was a perfect time to try out other people's builds and see what I think of them. I do think there are a lot of potential builds out there that I might be sleeping on, and this is the opportunity to take a look at those, see if I find a new gameplay that I or you might enjoy, and I would definitely love to see you guys submit some of your favorite builds in the comments down below as well. Whether you use Remnant 2 Toolkit, that's what I'm doing for this build. So this is from Solar Panel 16, and you can make your own Remnant 2 Toolkit and link in the description. You could send me a video, or you could give me the description of the build and I'll try out for myself. Just make sure you have all the relevant parts in there. Another thing to keep in mind, if you're running co-op, I kind of left it in the video for you to check out, but you'll see I am working hard to set up this build and the gameplay for it, whereas the player I was playing co-op with was running Monolith and Nebula, and they were essentially playing the game on easy mode. But keep in mind, those two are probably going to get nerfed sooner rather than later, so if you do want to have some other builds ready for when those get brought down a bit and it's not just essentially walking AoE attacks, then this is going to be the type of build that you're going to want to check out for sure. Anyway, jumping into it, this is called Space Magic and Archery, once again from Solar Panel 16, linked in the description as well as the pinned comment. It combines the Handler with Attack Dog and the Invader with Wormhole. So the armor is Knotted Helm, Leto Mark II armor, Radiant Greaves, and then Fey Royale Vambraces. Also using the Crystal Heart with health, range crit chance, and range damage. The weapons are Sagittarius with Starfall Supercharger as a mutator, then Dreamcatcher with Dreamwave and Steadfast as a mutator, and then finally Bolt Driver with Song of Aether and Feedback. So I'll explain how the loop works, but first we have the Amulet, which is Abrasive Whetstone. That is going to give you that increased crit chance and crit damage against bleeding enemies. This is important. And then Atonement Fold, Probability Cord, Akari Warband, and Hardcore Metal Band with the Mud Tooth Tonic as the concoction you'll be using. Now, a couple very important things to keep in mind. First off, the gameplay loop is pretty involved with this build. You're going to have to do some setup before you get your maximum amount of damage. And if you make a mistake, your damage is going to be a bit lower. For example, the first part, if your dog is unable to hit an enemy, which causes them to bleed, that is a big part of this build, then you are going to want to run something like the Pipe Bomb in order to make a bleeding enemy, or maybe play co-op with an ally who can make them bleeding instead. That extra crit chance and crit damage is absolutely vital for the build, and you're going to want to keep that in mind. Number two, in order to use this effectively, you're going to want to probably pop the Song of Aether first, slow down your enemies, or you could possibly use your Dreamcatcher instead. And then from there, pop your Attack Dog to do extra damage, use the Wormhole for that increased crit, and then use your Sagittarius to do a bunch of damage. You can also use Starfall first or last. Just make sure immediately out of your Wormhole, you are using the Sagittarius first to do the most damage with that weapon. If you use your Bolt Driver or your Starfall, you're just going to have a smaller amount of damage right from when you get out of that Wormhole. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. If your dog cannot reach an enemy, then you might want to use a Pipe Bomb to make the enemy bleeding, because that's going to increase your damage and your crit chance by quite a bit. So definitely important to do so when you are running through the game. This build is fun because it does pretty much everything. You can take on bosses, you can just run through the overworld, you can go through dungeons and everything like that. There's really nothing this can't do as long as you're making sure that you're getting one of the enemies bleeding. So instead of the Bolt Driver, it was suggested you could swap out a different handgun and add a way like Twisting Wounds or something of that nature in order to make sure your enemies are bleeding. You can also use the Bleeding Mod, one of the bleeding mods, if you want to, instead of Song of Aether, but that's not going to do much for your primary damage. It's just going to make sure that you're doing extra bleeding damage over the course of time, while also increasing your crit chance of crit damage. So that's an option for sure. But again, with this build, I do enjoy it. I think it is a pretty solid setup overall. Like I said, my only downside is right now there's more powerful things that just seem less convoluted to set up. Whereas this one's interesting. I just wish it did a little bit more with the setup, and so you were able to do a bit chunkier damage, because without something like the Invoker, you don't have extra charges for your skills, so you're not going to be able to spam them, and so having less wormholes does mean that you might be able to use it a couple times, but there will be a bit of a cooldown, so you definitely have to keep in mind. The cooldown's not crazy, but it's long enough to feel like you're not doing that heavy chunk damage that you might have. You could always potentially swap the handler for the Invoker, and that will allow you to have extra wormhole chances, while also swapping something like your Bolt Driver for maybe an Enigma with those twisting wounds, so that way you're able to consistently bleed enemies, but also keep in mind you won't have the dog there to revive you if you do go down. So there's pluses and minuses either way. Overall, I think this is a fun build. I do think it has a lot of potential, and I do like the way that it works overall. You feel tankier than you would expect, mostly because of the hardcore metal band, but I do feel like there is room for improvement with this one. And with all the setup, I was hoping for it to be a little bit stronger overall. Again, I do enjoy it. I think this is the type of build that a lot of players will like. It's just, if you're going to use a crit build at this current time, I feel like Hugs is just going to be a bit more reliable and easier to use for most people. So because of that, that's why I say this build is solid, not spectacular. I would definitely check it out if you have not already. Now, as far as what's next for builds, I have some others that I found that I definitely want to check out, but I need your help. I need you guys to submit some builds to me in the comments down below so I can test them out. As long as I have everything on the list, I will definitely see what I can do with them and see how much I enjoy different playstyles, because I think that matters a lot more than most people anticipate. We'll see people running the same things pretty consistently across the game, but I love trying something new, taking it into the apocalypse level content, and it being way better than I might have expected. And if that's the case, then I would love to check it out. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. If you want to see more Remnant 2 content from me, subscribe to the channel. Helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more of it. My name is JoPa. I hope you have a good one. I'll catch you all later.